Good morning. Everyone looks up from their tablets. This is great. Thank you guys so much for coming. We are a little worried. Friday, midday, either you guys are all hungover from last night or just came here for breakfast. So this is great. I'm Bridget Sexton. I work on the Global Entrepreneurship Outreach team here at Google. I've been at Google for about 4 years and focused on a lot of different things, aka not focused too much. I worked in advertising and then actually spent 2 years working on our emerging markets team in Ghana and focused on sub-Saharan Africa. And I've spent a lot of time at Google traveling. I think I hit my 50th country last week, which is a little exhausting. I still look this good. It's a joke. You guys need to, work on this.
You're like to
These are jokes. So our team, lots of people ask about global entrepreneurship, what we do. We really focus on developing ecosystems around the world. There's a question from the earlier session about Mexico. How do we actually develop our ecosystem there? And the guy said, one of the panelists up here said, it's all about having good leadership on the ground who's investing in building that infrastructure and building that community. And we're very, very privileged and lucky to have 5 of those such people on this panel with us today. I've pretty much interacted with most of these people through a lot of Google's projects and partnerships that we do globally in the entrepreneurship space, looking at how can we help with partnerships and products and also with our Google-specific programs to encourage entrepreneurship, and particularly startups. So with that, I'm actually going to introduce each of our panelists. The format is basically we're going to have some discussion here. These guys are quite lively. We've had a pretty hilarious morning already. So feel free to ask questions as well. We're going to have about 15 minutes at the end for questions. So please keep them, if you can, even write them down so you're ready when we have that set up. So with that, we have on my left, Jonathan Bradford. Is your name Jonathan or just John?
Sorry. Everybody awake?
Yeah.
It's John and or Jonathan, depending upon whether you're my mother.
Okay, not
So
your
I
mom.
prefer John.
So John is actually the founder of Springboard, which is a 13-week accelerator program in the UK. He's actually helped found 13 accelerator programs around the world, from Moscow all the way to Montreal. And he personally runs 5 of them, which I'm not sure how he does that since I mostly see you at conferences. And he is actually a former accountant, which we are not going to hold him to today. Yeah, it's pretty sad. Aiden is a general partner at Genesis, which is an Israeli VC in Tel Aviv that's focused on early stage investment. He has had a number of good exits, we'll say. He's been founder of a few companies, Face.com, Alternity, and recently started an incubator called The Junction in Tel Aviv. And then we have Jehan, she is part of Pasha, which is Pakistan focused IT education and training program, and they work to develop links internationally for Pakistan and the tech community. She's had 29 years of experience working in this field, helping bridge the tech community in Pakistan to places like Dubai, Hong Kong, regionally, and the Valley as well. And she's a huge advocate for entrepreneurship and technology development in Pakistan. Erik, the guy with the big red daunting beard over here, he's much friendlier than he looks. You guys are a really tough crowd. He's a co-founder of Ushahidi, which is a crowdsourcing platform. Many of you probably have heard of it. He started the iHub, which is an innovation hub based out of Nairobi, Kenya. He grew up in Sudan, and Kenya has been a long time in Africa, although his Swahili is not that good, which I found out last night. And he is a senior TED fellow and is currently raising a fund focused on technology startups in Africa. Jeffery Paine is the founder, one of the founding partners of Golden Gate Ventures, based out of Singapore. He's focused on early stage investments across the region of Southeast Asia and also some up into the rest of Asia. And he's also one of the founders and managing partners of Founders Institute and has helped that grow across the continent, and also a longtime VC. So please welcome me in joining our panelists. All right, so we're going to get started here in 142 characters or less. Tell me what is unique about your market, your home market. Starting with you, Jonathan.
John. Definitely John. Interesting statistic, London has 260 nationalities in it. The next largest city in the world, close to that, is New York, which is 150. It's a massive, massive melting pot, and it's got great entrepreneur visas for those that are interested.
Cool. Aiden, what's unique about your market?
So, anyone here from Israel? So I'll know whether. Okay, we do have. Bridget asked for great statistics. So just the funny statistic is that the general time to an exit is 5.8 years. Average marriage in Tel Aviv is 5. Anyways, but just so the interesting thing about Israel, I think it's a very small country, right? Depending how you count, it's 6-7 million people, virtually almost zero local market. We don't get along too well with our region, so there's no regional market either. So every startup from the get-go is international in nature. The stats are, you have about 50,000 engineers working at any given point at about 2,000, 3,000 startups. So basically the issue, if there is an issue in Israel about entrepreneurship, it's mostly that everyone wants to be an entrepreneur and does not want to be the first employee. So that's the biggest problem that we want that we're tackling. Israel is the third largest country in the NASDAQ, so we actually get many companies out IPO'd, M&A'd. So we're very international in nature, and I think that's pretty unique about the country.
Yeah, you've expanded your character limit. Yeah. Jehan?
Okay, we have 187 million people, 60% of them below the age of 30. We have only 25 million internet users, but we have about 120 million mobile subscribers. So I think that in itself is a great opportunity. Many of the people who have a mobile device or a mobile phone have never had a landline. So, and the country is vast. The youth bulge is an opportunity and yet can also be a challenge. So many of us realize that there'll never be enough jobs for all the people that we have in the country, and it's growing by about 4% every year. So we're going to have many more people before we stop. And so we need to create entrepreneurs, and I think everybody in the country realizes that, and so I'm very passionate about doing what I can to increase the number of entrepreneurs in Pakistan.
Though I live in Kenya, I'll speak for Africa as a region, which is always a mistake, but I'll try anyway. So we have 1 billion people in the continent, and we have about 140 million internet users, which isn't very big, 14% of the population, right? And then the phone penetration, though, is north of 700 million, so over 70% mobile phone penetration. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to most people that about 96+% of all internet traffic goes through the mobile phone. And so the paradigm in Africa is mobile first, and everything else would be second.
Hi, just show of hands, who is from Southeast Asia? Oh, okay, great. So I'll speak on behalf of Singapore. Singapore is also a very small country. Our local domestic market is very small. So in Southeast Asia, the population is around 620 million, which is fairly massive if you really count the countries that are opening up, like Myanmar right now. It's pretty interesting. Indonesia has just over 250 million, and I think as of last month, the first ever $40 Android phone has come out from China. So what's going to happen? I think in general, in Southeast Asia, the mobile penetration will keep going, and the PC penetration will also keep going. So in general, mobile penetration is always roughly around 50 to 70%, and PC penetration is always below 50% for emerging markets. Take aside Singapore. Singapore is a bit crazy. So it is extremely interesting right now. For Golden Gate, we have investors from the Valley that is interested in Southeast Asia because it is showing signs of early stage China and early stage Vietnam.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys. So now we're going to move into a round of specific questions for each of them. Aiden, you've had many successful startups, a lot of exits. and also a lot of investments in the region. What made you start the Junction? It's a, kind of a co-working incubator space. Why did you start that in Israel, the startup nation?
So part of the ecosystem in Israel in the 90s, I think a major part, 90s and early 2000s, was telecom type companies, security type companies, very strong back-end processing, mostly resulting from the Israeli army. I'm not sure whether you know, we have mandatory service in Israel, so 18 to 21. And the good news is that there are the intelligence core units that actually train some of the best computer scientists worldwide in actual mission critical systems. So that actually created awesome companies that came out, but the army doesn't do e-commerce or mobile much, or so there are certain things that you don't get trained as well, which are now the biggest potential growth engines for pretty much any startup. So when I moved over to the dark side, as some would say, of VCing, I thought what you just need to modify is find a way to invest in early stage startups. So syndicate, make sure that money is readily available, get great deal flow, so just the basics of venture capital. The truth was, though, and I think that's part of the ecosystem of any international country right now that wants to create those kind of startups, is there weren't good consumer-oriented startups. They were sporadic. There was no information sharing between them, and they just couldn't do what you can do in Silicon Valley. So the Junction was kind of a prototype that we thought, how can we get better companies? So there are just 3 questions that you get asked before joining. The first one is, are you working on the venture full time? The second one is the entire team going to work together? And the third one is, are you willing to work 90% of your time on your own startup and 10% of the time on other people's startup that are sitting just next to you? And surprisingly, not many people actually answer yes to all of these. But once you do answer yes, you actually create an interesting critical mass. And that's what the Junction is all about. It's creating a pay-it-forward economy where we don't take anything. As a VC, we can take a very long-term look, so we can look 10 years ahead. And we don't care about short-term revenue. So what we actually do is we don't ask anything from the companies, and in return we ask them to help each other. So the gist of this is the Junction is all about to create that kind of companies, the consumer, the B2C companies, which I believe is a huge opportunity for any entrepreneur outside of the US. What you care about in the B2C company is analytics, funnel, things that everyone is familiar, and you can get all the resources that you want, even outside of the Valley. Cool. But to achieve that, you actually need to create that ecosystem, and the Junction is all about that.
Cool. Thank you. I think, John's been working in this field for a while, 12, 13 accelerator programs now. What do you see these guys producing? What has surprised you about working with all these different programs globally? And do you think any of them are better or worse, any of these particular ecosystems you're working with?
So the one thing I personally and very strongly believe is no particular country or geographic region has a monopoly on entrepreneurs. I believe that there's a balance, there's a proportion that exists, that mad, crazy people who want to do stuff which is totally irrational and start their own business when the chances of ever achieving anything are nil are the same the world over. The subtle differences in certain other geographic regions, they may be doing other things. And one of the things that I've discovered is actually if you give them the tools and the support from the community and other entrepreneurs, you can kind of guide them down a path which is what I call product-led. So moving away, this sounds really silly in this room, but in the world I exist in, I see a lot of people building stuff for other people, service-led stuff. It has no impact, it's unscalable, you can't export it, or if you do, it's really difficult to create any value or meaningful value. What I've noticed is in all of the countries I've worked in, as I described from Montreal to Moscow, entrepreneurs exist and they have the same passion and the same hunger and the same desires. They just want to find soulmates to work alongside, which is kind of what's being achieved in Israel. And when you give them that opportunity, they run towards it, and they run toward it really quickly.
Cool. I almost made a dating reference there from the soulmates comment, but I held back. so you guys are a really tough crowd, actually.
Yeah.
We've been warming up all morning.
Yeah.
So.
The other one I actually use is fellow travelers. That's the big advantage that Silicon Valley has, is there's so many more fellow travelers who are moving in the same direction. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't achieve that in other places. It just, you have to create critical mass around something to make it happen.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Jeff, you've done a lot of investing in Southeast Asia, and there's not as many incubators and accelerator programs as developed. What are you guys investing in at Golden Gate Ventures, given that every country has its own culture, every country has its own language, and it's very segmented, and particularly without kind of these ecosystems as quite as evolved?
Right. So basically, Golden Gate Ventures, we look at more towards consumer-facing companies. So we do look at mobile a lot, consumer internet, games, and also software as a service. What's been challenging is obviously, within a 4-hour flight, you get to see many countries, different languages, different cultures. Singapore is a developed country. We are right smack in the middle of developing countries, and we kind of get along with them quite well. I think, yeah. So the challenge is a few things. Number one, they tend to think very small. So the vision-wise is fairly small. They tend to think very local or hyper-local. They need to be a little bit crazy. And what's also missing is a layer of mentors that have been there, done that, and not been there, done that 10 years ago. Been there, done that within 5 years. Because technology changed so fast, right?
Jeff, can I ask you what's your latest investment, and why?
Sure. So I think, let's see. The latest one was a sort of an enterprise company. They do flight operations ERP for small aviation companies. It's pretty interesting. They originate from Malaysia, but they have client base all over the world. So that's kind of different in that sense. They go global from day one because they know if they go hyper local, they will die. They don't have enough money to survive. And in general, in Southeast Asia, maybe in the other parts of emerging countries, there is a pressure to make money fast, to survive quickly. So sometimes innovation takes a second seat to surviving quickly.
I actually would disagree with that. So one of the things that actually gets pushed really hard around in Europe is the fact that we get to money faster. Because there's less capital in the market, we actually have to go and say, well, do customers want to actually pay real cold hard cash to make this happen? And a really good example of that is Huddle, which is based in San Francisco, a split between London and the Valley, just closed out 23 million. But they aggressively went after, forget the bloody freemium model. It's like, somebody has to pay me cash to make this happen. And actually in smaller, where there is restrictions around capital, I actually personally think that that's a good thing.
Yeah. Erik, you've been working in a very early stage market. Many would say, what's the technology ecosystem? I mean, what are you talking about, Africa and the technology ecosystem? Is that even possible? And you started iHub, which is a technology innovation hub, and you're also working on a fund. I'd love to know what the role of iHub is in the community and what you're looking at when you start to raise this fund as well.
Yeah, so we first started the iHub because we had this we did have a vibrant tech culture in Nairobi, but it wasn't centered anywhere, so people hardly met. And so we thought, well, what if we just built a place that we could call our own, have a coffee shop in it, and guys get to hang out. So we have over 8,000 members now, all from Nairobi, about 95% from Nairobi. And what they're doing is they're just getting together and meeting, right? And so a lot of people say, well, what's the value of the iHub? Actually, Google Africa is based out of Nairobi, right? So Google Africa is a partner of ours. And I remember going and seeing Joe Muchero, who's was the Africa director at the time, and talking to him about this place and saying, hey, we need your support here. And he and his team, they said, so being Google, so how are you going to measure success? And we sat there, and we're like, we don't even have paint on the walls yet. And we're thinking, I said, well, we think if you just put enough smart people in a room, good things will happen. And so after about a minute of quiet, everybody looks at each other and starts smiling and saying, okay, well, we'll back it anyway, right? Even though we don't really know how it'll work. And the truth is, you have to experiment with things when you're in a new market like this, because there's just no way to know what's actually going to work. So getting a bunch of smart people in a room did work. We have about 45 companies have been kind of born out of it over the last 2 years. Some of them have failed already. Some of them have gone on and gotten more funding. Some of them have actually gotten funding from Bay Area VCs and are getting bigger. So there's when you're in a new space like that, in a nascent market, you're building everything. You actually are building the market many times itself, which is exciting, but it has a lot of challenges. And for us, it's really just about about bringing people together and seeing what happens. And then going on to the seed funding side, which is what we've done with the Savannah Fund, is just saying, can we apply the accelerator model that's from the Bay Area from Europe, something like that, to Africa? Will it work there? Again, an experiment, we'll find out. We have about half the fund raised right now, and we'll find out by probably this time next year how well it does.
If anyone's interested in writing checks, you can see Erik after this.
Actually, Bridget said not to talk about the specific event called GeekCon, which we're doing, but or not to turn the panel into a discussion about GeekCon. But
Aiden's passion is actually really in GeekCon. So if we let him, he will talk about us. If you guys want to riot at some point, we're okay with it.
So anyway, it's a 3-day event, and Google is sponsoring it, so I'm actually allowed to. It actually gives something back to Google. But I would very much agree with the point that you need to create critical mass. I think I've heard 3 times already that word mentioned, and it's all about being able to create those teams. The question is, in every country, is how do you create those teams that they'll be able to do something together? The most important thing for every entrepreneur is to be able to convince the team members that they actually should be doing whatever that he thinks or they think that they should be doing, and way before they have funding, right? So when you actually have that burn rate, when every month you have a reduced amount in your bank account just because you're doing your passion. And the question is, how do you build those teams? And that's a huge question in every market. GeekCon, as a 3-day event, just brings people as a hardware and software and art and just get them to build stuff. It's crazy stuff.
Do you want to tell us what the purpose of GeekCon is?
Oh yeah, the purpose is to create useless projects. So and that's the actual definition, right? Because people are so much more creative when they're told to do something that is not meaningful. Versus, okay, I have the socially acceptable, I need to make money, I need to do something else. So things like a trampoline that you jump and your silhouette becomes your login password. So if you want to get back to your PC, you need to jump exactly that same way again. Or, which could be productive in some fashion. At least
it's a weight loss program.
Yeah, weight loss program, yeah. Or really, really crazy stuff. But from that, you actually had as of last month, 7 teams that started companies. As of right now, about 11. So I actually had a good success. And that's the basis, in my mind, to just starting things up, is critical mass.
Just a little thing to kind of pivot off that, too, is I think here in the States, I lived in the States for about 6-7 years, and it's interesting because here in the States, it's socially acceptable within the culture for you to wear jeans and a T-shirt and be at work, right? And that could be in a coffee shop, right? But in Kenya or in many places in Africa, if you don't wear a suit and tie and you don't go to the city center, your family doesn't consider that you have a job. And so it's really difficult. You have to create this culture about it being okay that you do this other kind of stuff. And so I guess we're a little bit further down the stack than some other countries. But it's really interesting to see how you can build that kind of a culture out in whatever part of the world that you're in.
Yeah, I always love when people come to Google in suits. It's like the first time anyone feels so awkwardly dressed up at a business meeting.
Yeah, Paul Graham actually wrote a really interesting essay on startup cultures and communities. And actually one of the things he described in that essay was, how do you make being an entrepreneur really cool and being most normal thing in the world? And the problem is entrepreneurs exist, but they're such a minority within the overall population. When they actually all clamber together and work alongside each other, they can, as I described, stare out the window on point and look at all those weird people outside. They work for other people. And it's kind of that notional idea of turning something which is considered unacceptable culturally in certain instances into just the most normal, boring, this is what we do. This is the coolest stuff in the world.
Yeah, and that's actually what Jehan's trying to do right now in Pakistan, is create the culture where entrepreneurs are celebrated. And you've actually been running a fund for the last year. I'd love to hear, it's a social innovation fund focused on kind of social impact startups. Can you tell us a little bit about the impact of that fund so far?
Okay, so historically in Pakistan, the tech sector has concentrated on building applications for people with money, so mainly for the financial sector, whether domestically or internationally. But there are a lot of problems within the country that need to be solved. And many of the young people living in the country know how to solve those problems. What we did was just to open their minds to the fact that you can do it using technology. And so Google helped us, seeded a fund in Pakistan, which is a $250,000 fund. And we've been managing it for the last year. The reason that it was needed, sometimes I don't even think you need money to start working on an idea, but these young people at universities and fresh graduates think that without money you can't do anything. So we figured, okay, let's get rid of that mindset and actually give them the money. Actually, what they need is guidance, mentoring, helping them sort of put a team together, because very often what happens, and I think this happens all around the world, is geeks who work together sort of try and put together a team without having anybody with any business knowledge or anybody with any marketing knowledge. And so they create things that they find exciting, but they don't know what the consumer will like. And so with the Social Innovation Fund, what we've done is we asked for ideas, and we got, within the first week, we had 300 people sort of write in with ideas that they thought were really cool. And we chose, our jury actually chose 5 of those ideas and said, okay, we'll fund this, but we will attach it with milestones, and we will attach them to mentors who will guide them through the process. So, we know that many of them may fail, but that failure will teach them a lot. Some of the ideas that came out was that you may not even consider social innovation. So one of them was the resurgence of the national language, Urdu, because many of us think it's cool to speak English, and so we're forgetting our culture, we're forgetting our heritage, we don't know of all the literature, the rich culture that exists. And so 2 of the young people said, we want a resurgence in this. And the reason that kids prefer not to speak in Urdu or not to read Urdu literature is because it isn't cool. There's nothing innovative that exists. There's nothing that you can download onto your iPod or to your mobile phone and listen to. And so they started, recording some of these stories and some of these songs and some of the poetry onto these devices and making it downloadable from a website. And that has created a lot of excitement, not only in the kids within Pakistan, but amongst expat Pakistanis in the US, in Europe, etc., who think that the kids are losing touch with their heritage and their language. So that was one. Another one was that there are several diseases still in Pakistan that may have been eradicated all around the world, and blood is often needed, blood donations. And it's very difficult to find them, and sometimes it's really critical that it be found immediately. So this one young man who has a network of about 200,000 already on social media said, I know all these people, I'm going to create something using technology which will connect blood donors to hospitals and to people who need blood. And so he's working on that project, and already we had a dengue attack where he was able to connect people to blood donors and was able to save a lot of lives. So those kind of projects, I think, are helping kids not only solve problems for the community, but they're also getting them to think about how to take a project from an idea stage onto an actual implementation stage, and then they can work on commercial ideas using the same logic. So I think it's really amazing what it has been able to do so far. We funded about 5 ideas, only about $10,000 each, and we're looking at funding the next 5 within the next month. The first year was difficult because we were sort of learning as we went along, but now we think that process will be accelerated.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. Something I'm always struck by now living in the Valley and then still getting to travel a lot is actually a lot of startups here, no offense, are actually just creating features and another thing for me to log into that I'm going to forget, and I'm going to type that little forgot password thing every single time. But what I found in a lot of the emerging markets and internationally is people are actually trying to solve problems, and there is actually revenue behind many of these opportunities. And a social focus or actually solving a real problem can create sort of sustained revenue. You're not going to be pushed out of the market quite as easily, I think.
So one of the things that we haven't funded, but that is also started off as a social idea, but has been able to generate revenue for the people who started is something like what happens in what already exists in Kenya is the M-Pesa branchless banking. You know, in a population of 187 million, we only have 20 million who have bank accounts. So how do the rest of them operate? They don't seem to have any way of transferring funds or paying for things. And so Easy Pesa is a solution that came on, and they have been
Great naming.
Yeah, no, what they do is enable payments through a mobile phone, and it's a very easy process. And every kiosk selling cigarettes or anything, it is a certified Easy Pesa vendor. And all you do is show them an identity and give them their mobile number, and they can transfer the funds to somebody with another mobile. So with 120 million people having access to mobile phones, it's sort of suddenly everybody has that power of transferring funds, paying for things, paying utility bills, all that. And it's a very easy solution. It's a social solution, and yet it generates revenue for the people who founded it.
Yeah, it's great. I think one thing you mentioned is around milestones. And I was talking with these two, I think 2 days ago, and you guys were mentioning that you like to do really small seed investments, and lots of them, despite how much work they are. Something along the milestone marker. Why do you do that? Why do you do a lot of small seed investments, despite the amount of work?
Because I'm not lazy. So I used to be a VC, as I described, for about 3.5 minutes. I used to do a lot of seed funding. I had this really weird thing that happened, which was the smaller the investment, the more progress the teams made. When I wrote them a big check, they bluntly, I'm not allowed to swear, am I? They didn't progress as well as they should have. They spent more time concentrating on product and not enough time spending with kind of customer-facing time. When I wrote people really small checks, I suddenly discovered the first thing they did was they went to see a customer. That creates a massive amount of work. I mean, our friend Mr. McClure knows what that now looks like. Seemed like a good idea at the time. And we've done something very similar in Bulgaria, interestingly alongside Google. But we've just created a 12 million euro fund, as I describe, and I'll get shot for this when I get back to Europe. It's a desert. It's an absolute desert. There's no funding, and there's lots of smart people, but they just don't know how to get started. In the next 3 years, we're going to fund 200 teams to start their businesses or actually take their ideas or products and make real things from them. We expect a massive amount of fallout of that, but that's essentially what you guys have been doing for the last 30 years.
So you're going to lose Google's money, what you're saying?
You didn't put in any money.
Can you bring some of it to us?
No.
This is the way you get positive PR. You give everyone tablets and phones, and just kidding.
Yeah. You don't have to go through customs and explain what all this stuff is. But essentially, I will swear now, so I apologize in advance. The approach is throwing a lot of shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And in markets where there are limited funds available, it's better to try and to not succeed, but at least try. I have also this big thing about what I call the entrepreneurial compost heap. I don't know whether that translates into American. But essentially, if you take a very gardening analogy, you go through and you weed and you take stuff out. You don't throw it over the fence, you stick it in a compost heap. And then you mulch the plants and the rest of the garden as well. So actually what you do is you embrace failure and you say, actually, just because you fail doesn't make you bad, but what we want to do is you've learned a whole bunch of really interesting stuff. Because of that, we're going to feed you back into the system. So when the stuff that actually works really well, it takes hold much stronger because you're retaining the talent, the experience, and the knowledge that you gain through not just the successes, but the failures that you have. Where you can build cultures which embrace that attitude, where you want people to try, and even if that ultimately leads to failure, the fact that you push it back into the system and say, that's not socially unacceptable, that's actually much smarter because we want to try and do something actually make it better and to actually help the ones that do take root.
Yeah, Aiden, you do, I mean, you're in Israel, you have there's lots of money, lots of capital flow there, and you probably have a lot of opportunities for Series A, Series B investments. Why are you doing seed?
So, who here took VC money? Raise your hands. Okay, so very
Here
little.
who wants some? See
No,
Aiden
no.
after this.
I think it's an important distinction. So the one thing that you need to figure out, and part of the basic issue is VC. The way that the VC system works is that you actually need to deploy a good amount of capital because your LPs, your limited partners, are looking for a specific return. So if you run $100 million fund, you're expected to give back about X3 returns if your fund is good. Now, X3 return, that's 300 million. Generally, a VC would own about 25% of the company at the point of exit. So that means that you actually need to generate $1.2 billion worth of value, right, to return to your LPs the kind of returns that they're expecting, which is virtually impossible if you do not deploy a significant amount of capital. So if you deploy $100,000, which I just did in an awesome company, we haven't announced it yet. But basically you take 3 pictures of your legs or of your feet, and you can then generate insoles for it, just internet-based insoles, which I needed insoles for like 3 years, but I haven't done that because you need to go to a doctor and measure your feet, and so this guy just needed $100,000. But if you think about that, the VC model, say I now get a significant return on that. He sells his company instead of $1 million worth, he's selling it for 10 million, right? The amount of money that I as a VC just made is almost ridiculous. It's not good for my LPs. That's why VCs don't do those investments other than buying options, which I strongly advise you not to, for a variety of reasons, all of them on the internet. Now, I think the model needs to be different, and I encourage you to also do that in your local groups by not giving away money or giving 20,000. That's the same, but my perspective is don't take anything. Give them the value that they can use in order to build that company. So if you need a place to sit for 3 months, 6 months, hey, take that, get that for free. If you need to have the information that you need of what it means what a cap table is or other such things that you must be educated about, just get that for free. If you need connections in Google, Twitter, Facebook, or whatever, get that for free. Basically reduce the cost of entrepreneurship in those critical customer development 6 months cycles. Give that for free and just make sure that people fail fast. Right? If your idea then actually sticks, if it makes sense, then you can raise the A rounds, etc. And as a VC, in my VC hat, we can give you that money. But to create a community, to create an actual infrastructure in every country, every even city or state in the US, right? Right now you have Mecca, which is San Francisco. You have a few other, like New York is finally becoming like that. But in every state that you are coming from, I would encourage you to try to build those groups and reduce the cost of entrepreneurship. And that's what we're trying to do. And then if we can make money off of it, that's great. But the reason why I'm doing that, and that's the short answer is just because you can build that. You can actually create, you can make a difference.
Cool. I'd love to switch to another topic. So we have this whole idea of mobile, tablets. Is it a desktop? Is it a PC? Is it going to be your laptop? Is it your iPad? Like, where is this next wave of technology for your region? And tell me why. And we're going to do this in like a 1-minute sort of rapid fire. So we can start with Jeff at the end. I mean,
sure.
Mobile.
Yeah, from where I'm from, I think mobile is the #1 thing that's growing right now. For a certain segment of market, I think the iPhones are still the sort of something that people aspire to have. But what we are seeing is Android is taking over Asia big time. So Japan is now already, they don't build the K-type phones anymore. It's all Android now. China have their, they have their own versions of Android that they built that is much interesting for Chinese people. I think some of you from China, you probably have seen them. And the cheap manufacturers, from China are, churning out really, really cheap handsets, and that's going to be flooding India, Middle East, North Africa, and that will certainly, change a lot of things. But that's one thing. That's just the device, right? The next thing is the data. So that is still a little bit nascent. They have the device. They kind of know that it's cool looking, but then when they want to switch on data, they kind of like, okay, I have to pay. Majority of the markets are prepaid, so they get a little bit stuck when they're like, oh, I have to pay for this, and so they kind of get stuck. So some emerging countries and the mobile operators are pretty. They take risks. So in Indonesia, they take, they are kind of quite cool in taking risks. So what they do is they'll package a mobile phone and a plan, and then they'll tell you, there's these 3 apps on the phone, Facebook, Twitter, and MiG33, which is the local regional mobile social network. If you use that, the data is free, right? So that creates, a ton of people using social media. And when you meet these people, when you ask them what is Facebook, they'll just show you the app in the phone. That's it. They have no clue what or where Facebook come from. So this is Facebook, right?
Jeff,
So that's very interesting.
do you have any suggestions for developers maybe looking at Asia as a market?
Yeah, so if you're building games right now, I think Japan is interesting. China is also interesting. There's over 100 Android app stores in China. I think the top 20, you can kind of find them and then, get them to market it for you. But I think if a lot of you are Android developers, I take it, it's a very, very good place to be.
Erik?
Yeah, so most people think that we don't have any data connectivity in Africa, right? Or very limited. You think maybe it's edge. The truth is I can get off the plane in Nairobi and have better 3G connectivity than I can when I get off the plane in San Francisco. And that goes up country in Kenya as well, right? So it's not just in the city, in the capital city, but it's also in the towns and cities across the country. And this is actually quite common in a lot of countries across Africa. There's a lot of preconceived notions about what technology in Africa is and where it's at, and it's usually not true, right? What you've been hearing. M-Pesa was brought up earlier. The biggest, so obviously it's mobile in Africa. I said that earlier. The biggest mobile payment, organization in the world is in Kenya. We move more money. 1 out of every 25 mobile payment users in the world is Kenyan. We move 25% of our GDP through mobile payments, and it's the only.
I think it's every day, actually almost every day.
It could be, yeah. I mean, it's like $1.4 billion has been moved as of December of this last year. So it's a lot of money going through the system. And the interesting thing about that is, if you think about it, who is really innovative in the U.S. or in Europe on mobile payments? Well, not very much actually. Most of it's just a new skin or face paint on credit cards. It's in places like Kenya. It's in places like the Philippines, where you're seeing really new forms of money movement, where it has nothing to do with the bank account, has nothing to do with the credit card. It has the only thing it has is airtime or just agent to agent kind of money or person to person kind of money movement. And this is phenomenal. There's a groundbreaking kind of innovation happening in places that are well at the edge, right? While everybody's paying attention to the U.S. or Europe or Asia, there's things happening in places like Africa that are really shocking. The Microsoft, shocking them too. That's shocking the Visas and MasterCards of the world. So I think you can look at Africa and you see mobile, and you can see new things happening there that you won't find anywhere else.
Great. Jen, you want to start? We're actually going to start questions here in a minute. So if you guys have questions, please feel free to line up between the two or behind the 2 mics here.
Okay, so in Pakistan, I think mobile definitely, much like Africa, it's the way that we're going, and it's the place we're at. Voice activated, any kind of applications that uses voice or SMS is working very well there.
Do you have any great local apps that are really strong in the market?
One of the problems that developers in Pakistan faced was market access because of the negative image of the country. 5% of the narrative of Pakistan is spread around 95% of the time. But the online stores like the Google Store and the App Store, Apple App Store, has meant that it doesn't matter where the app is developed. As long as it's good, people like it, they download it. So some of the top apps on the BlackBerry store have been from Pakistan, and they've been there for, they've been productivity apps, they've been gaming apps. Some of the top apps, top 10 apps on the Apple store in terms of games have been from Pakistan. And even in China, there have been millions of downloads of some of the games that have been developed there. So that's pretty exciting, because young people who've fresh out of university, maybe 2 years out of university, and they're developing games and they're selling them and making millions of dollars. One of our guys actually, during his holidays, decided to build an app because it was a problem that he was facing, and he built an app, and it was selling for $25 on the App Store.
Yeah.
$25 a download, and he sold 1 million, and he is suddenly one of the richest young kids in the country. So
It's probably quite cool to be an app developer now.
yeah, it is. Now everybody wants to be an app developer. Now you've got to figure out, what app works, and not all games work.
Yeah.
So that is the challenge right now, that, you've got to find ways of educating them, making sure. I think one of the biggest problems is I wish there were many more of our young developers here at I/O, because the excitement, the energy of this conference and the passion that they have, mixed together, they would have learned so much. They need a little bit of polishing, and that's it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
they're
agree.
some of the smartest kids there, and it's just the opportunity.
Yeah. And I'm going to change the question slightly on you. In the mobile space, what are you investing in? What's hot for you?
So it's almost a given that mobile is the computing platform today. Anything else is marginalized. So that, okay, we done. The exciting thing about trying to invest in what will be big 3 years from now is you see a lot of, you see the beginning, but a good portion of augmented humanity. I'm not sure whether it's a commonly used term. So Google Glass is a good example, is a very initial example. I haven't seen actual information being projected into it, so I'm suspending my disbelief. But that's augmented humanity, right? To improve us through the use of computing and bring that information in an always-on basis. There's another company that is actually very cool. Think of in-ears, like for deaf people, but right now that just for the general population, that you can actually play with your Android or iPhone or whatever and say, I want to hear what these guys are talking about just 5 meters away towards that direction. And you're hearing, it's a DSP on top of that actually has you can cancel noise or hear anything 5-10 meters away. So that's augmented. That's in my mind just
Not creepy at all.
No, a bit. But the point is of using technology in order to augment our very basic capabilities. So right now, that's one of the most exciting areas for me.
Cool. John, 1 minute.
Very quickly.
That will be a challenge.
Yeah.
So this is a shameless plug. We believe so fundamentally that mobile is important that we've actually launched a accelerator-only program for mobile. So go and apply now, Springboard Mobile, in London. We've got some awesome visas, which basically means I can actually land you. Forget about UK border authorities. If you can get past me, you and a founder can get a 3-year visa, potentially.
And you're Irish.
Yeah, I'm Irish. So I have this is a really big thing to me. So there are now technically more ARM chips in the world than there are physical arms on the planet. We are just about to hit the 5th generation of computing, blah, blah, blah. It's mobile computing, it's not mobiles. Every time you step down in computing world from mainframes to minis to workstations to personal computers, the number of devices increases and the geographical dispersity increases massively. So this is, as I described, not about West Coast latte sipping surfer dudes with iPhones. This is actually a massive, massive market. And it's going to exist everywhere else apart from in California.
Wow.
There you go.
California is an island. Okay, let's start taking a question over here. If you can introduce yourself very briefly and then try to keep your questions quite brief.
My name is Jason, East Coast entrepreneur, technologist, and my wife has been to the developing world several times, and it looks like our careers will take us there.
By the way, everybody's developing.
Well, some of us actually aren't, which is the problem.
My exposure as someone who's grown up in the States of the developing world is someplace where infrastructure is, my preconceived notions of it are that they're not as firm as they are here. So it's hard enough in the United States to get a company off the ground that's technology oriented without having to worry about, is the power going to be on, is the ISP going to be up, if my vendor leaves me high and dry, can I take them to court and get a civil action and get my compensation back? Can you talk about strategies for U.S.-based developers to sort of get involved in developing companies in developing nations where those things that we take for granted here aren't a given?
Erik, do you want to talk about that with IBO?
Yeah. May I address that? Okay, so we have lots of power issues. We've got, in certain parts of the country, security issues, but generally not. I mean, it's perceived to be that. But, we've solved them. Aren't entrepreneurs supposed to find solutions to problems? That's what we've done. So most people now have either UPSs on which their power runs. It doesn't matter when the power is off, the UPSs run them, the generators. We forget about the fact that the infrastructure will be given to us. We've created it ourselves because we know we cannot survive unless we have these devices. Now, the current new devices which are coming with longer battery power are helping us. So, I think as long as there is an entrepreneur, any problem that exists, actually they look at as an opportunity and they look at as a challenge and they find a solution and they just move on. So a lot of our companies now, it's hardly ever known, but one of the companies that emerged out of Pakistan was actually bought by the Carlyle Group here, which is, it was a financial services company for $100 million. Several others have just been sold. You know, there was a gaming studio that has had an investment of $35 million from Japan. So they're small companies, 20, 30, 100 people who have created businesses. It's the front office that needs to be outside because they need to market themselves. And that's begun to happen. So if you're thinking of investing in Pakistan, believe me, there's a friend of mine who graduated from Stanford, went back. He said to start a company here, it cost him $2.5 million, took him 11 months, failed, went there for $60,000, he started a company. It succeeded because there's so many opportunities for creating new applications, new solutions, and you've got a big market. And anything that works in Pakistan works in India, works in Africa, works in the Middle East. So you've got a huge market available to you. And you can try out ideas for as little as $10,000 to $15,000. If you fail, you try another one. And so, you've got the talent there. All you need is to use it and not be afraid to, as John was saying, if they fail, that's the beginning of the next success.
I'm gonna move on to the next question.
Can I quickly jump in there? Who's planning on taking a holiday this year? Nobody? Right, when you take a week off, go and travel and go and see the world and see what's actually happening outside of the US. Actually, only 10% of actually Americans have passports. That's really sad.
Over here?
So this is a question about Southeast Asia. I run a US-based startup that was introduced to Asia late last year, and we're doing very, very well over in Asia. We, in fact, now have an office based in Singapore, and we focus on large enterprise corporations, and I was just wondering if you had any advice for a US company that's expanding into Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, et cetera. What are things we need to watch out for, and how do we be successful?
Sure. So the easiest port of call is Singapore, because for Americans it's kind of like California but hotter all the time. Lots of great food, so you probably put on weight.
He says that without smiling.
Yeah. And so start with Singapore. Depending on how you want to do it, the good thing about Singapore is there's a lot of enterprise sales people you can hire, because we are grown up to be educated to work for big companies from the US and Europe. So there's a lot of people with very good corporate sales experience. So that's a good thing for you, especially if it is very enterprisey, like many months of sales cycles, that kind of thing. And then regionally, same thing. If you all you need to do really is to hire one guy that have regional experience, just one guy. That might take a while, but once you hire him, he will bring the rest of the team in.
Or her.
Or her, yes.
Or her.
Yeah, usually.
Question over here.
Yeah, quick question. So have you seen companies that have expanded into other countries do better by just essentially translating the languages on their existing apps and taking it there, or actually redoing the entire UI design to match that culture? And then have you also seen people who attack smartphones rather than smartphones and dumb phones essentially do better since they're such on a rise? Like, how have you seen smartphones rising in your individual countries?
Who has Instagram on their phone? Have a look at the interface. There is no language on it at all.
Okay.
When you start shrinking things to mobile devices, it's icon-led as opposed to language-led. So your ability to move things between geographical or cultural differences are minimal in my head.
We actually don't have any more time for questions, unfortunately, but these guys are going to be here in the outside. I actually have one last question for each of you. 30 seconds. I want to know, like, what keeps you passionate about the markets that you're working in, the ecosystems that you're working in? What keeps you passionate? What's the next thing for you?
Entrepreneurs.
Beautiful.
That's the shortest answer I've ever seen John give in my life. Except, would you like a beer? Yes.
Beaches, beautiful women, and the Tel Aviv spirit. Anyway, no, but seriously, you should come to Israel. But what keeps me up? So I'm still at 2 a.m. Just looking. I'm waking up, looking at executive summaries. I think that just the talent and just the originality. I learned that I'm old when I thought ringtones won't work out, and that is now a $5 billion industry. So it's great to see new people with new ideas, and that's really a huge driver.
Okay, I grew up in Hong Kong, and I moved back about 15, 16 years ago to Pakistan, and I choose to be there, although I could be anywhere else. And what keeps me there is the passion, the excitement in the young people, the energy, the need to want to prove themselves. And I think if I can contribute even 1% towards their growth, towards their success, towards their, believing that they can do anything that anyone else in the world can do, then I think I'm doing something right.
There's a lot more friction in a place like Africa, but there's also a lot more opportunity, and it's great to see kind of a community get together and grow something, grow a whole market and grow a whole industry to build a foundation for what's going to actually be affecting the continent in the next 5 to 10 years. So just being a part of that is why I do it.
For me, I echo this a lot. I am very sort of privileged to have to do what I do. It's really remarkable to help crazy people change the world, and I'm just amazed that I'm paid to do this. So, if you guys have that passion, just go for it. There will be people that will be standing behind you.
Thank you guys so much. I think this is really one of the most exciting times, if not the most exciting time to be an entrepreneur. If we look at technology, the technology you've seen the last 3 days, the barrier to entry is very, very low. You no longer have to be sitting in Silicon Valley. And in fact, some of the best entrepreneurs that I've seen in the last few years are not sitting here and doing phenomenally well and building things that we might think are US because we download them off of our Android or our iPhone or our iPad or your new Android tablet. But really they may have been created in Pakistan or Kenya or potentially those UK people. And I think that these guys have definitely taken the bootstrap approach to their economies and to their particular ecosystems. And I know many of you guys, actually, how many of you are from international markets? That is awesome. I think many of you guys have a chance to definitely be much like them in taking advantage of creating an ecosystem. All of their programs are actually available and open to a global audience. And I have seen a huge value in people taking their startup and going to a new market or going to a place that's a bit foreign, finding talent and being in one of these ecosystems. So if you're interested in joining an accelerator program or sitting in the iHub, there's some few Techstars companies who've actually moved themselves to Kenya, who I've met in the iHub. I think there's enormous opportunity, and I can't thank you guys enough for coming to share that. So please help me welcome or thank the crowd here, thank the audience, thank the panelists for coming.